In this lesson, we are going to introduce you to statistical questions and data. Let's begin. So, what is data? It can be described as a collection of facts. So, not opinions, but facts. For example, numbers, measurements, observations, and descriptions are all examples of data. How you feel about something, about the weather, not necessarily data. Categorical data here. So this data represents characteristics. And is often sorted into groups. So categories such as different kinds of movies, like an action movie or a horror movie or a funny movie, a comedy. You can say the same about books. You can talk about video games, like different types or genres of video games. So those would be categories. You could even say categories could be like grouped in ages. Like, for example, a category could be like elementary school is a category, middle school, high school, college. All of those are categories as well. So that could be categorical data. And numerical data, this data represents values that can be measured, specifically measured in numbers. So the thing with categorical data is that it could involve numbers as well. For like sixth grade could be a category. And, it seems like it's something that's measurable. So you want to, categorical can be a little confusing. But yeah, it's different categories, and then numerical data is things that are measurable with numbers. So in task 1, they want us to read each statement and determine if it is referring to a categorical or referring to categorical or numerical data. So let's read Luke first. He says, I'm collecting data that's to determine each student's favorite genre of book. So he's trying to figure out their favorite genre of book. Genres of books, that would be categorical. Categorical data. And it's categorical, it's these genres of books. So it is a categorical kind of data. Let's look at DeMarcus. He says, I'm collecting data to determine how many hours of sleep each student in our class gets. So he's trying to figure out how many hours of sleep. I would say that is numerical, because it's not like there are different categories of sleep. Numerical data, and it is the number of hours of sleep. Josie says, I'm collecting data to determine how much money each student's family spends on groceries each week. So this is about figuring out how much money students' families spends on groceries. I'd say that's numerical, because it is about the amount of money spent. Amount of money spent. And finally, we've got Heather. And for Heather, it says, I'm collecting data on the color of cars that run the stoplight in front of our school. It is so collecting data on the colors of cars. That's categorical. And it's the color of cars. Now, the thing that can get confusing about numerical versus categorical is when Luke and Heather, even when they are collecting data, they're eventually going to have numbers with their data. For example, like if Luke finds out that 10 kids like adventure books and 20 kids like mystery books, that is a number, but he's breaking them up into categories. Same with Heather. Like, she might find that 20 red cars ran a stoplight and 1 white car ran a stoplight. Numbers are involved in all of them, can be involved in all of them. But categorical, if you're looking at categorical, it's what they're measuring are different groups versus these numerical ones are specifically numbers. Anyways, we're going to identify two numerical and categorical data sets that could be observed about a standard deck of playing cards. So if you've ever seen a deck of playing cards, it's like this. Categorical data could be the colors of cards, which are either red or blue, and whether the cards have numbers or faces. Because if you've seen a deck of cards, they have like a K, a J, a K, and a Q, which stands for Jack, Queen, and King. And they also have this A, and that's the ace, which usually is a stand-in for one. Numerical data could be like how many face cards. So categorical could be like the type of cards. And in numerical could be how many face cards, how many black cards or red cards. So that would be numerical data. Let's go to the next section. It's about statistical questions. So this says for a question to be considered statistical, it must meet two criteria. The question must be able to be answered by data, and the data must vary. I'll explain what those both mean in a moment. But for example, a statistical question could be, how many pets do sixth graders does this sixth grade class have? When I ask how many pets, I mean how many pets do individual students in this class have? Because some may have 0 pets, some may have 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or maybe even 20 pets. So that's statistical because you can answer that by data including how many pets each student has, and the data does vary. It's not like everyone has 2 pets or everyone has 5 pets. So let's look at some examples. It's asking us to determine if each of the questions below are statistical or not. Rewrite any non-statistical questions to be statistical. So number 1, how many times a week do you go to football practice? That's not statistical. The reason why is if it's asking you how many times a week you go to football practice, for example, I go to football practice 0 times a week. And that's not something that changes because I don't go at all. Let's say you go twice a week. That also won't vary because you just go twice a week. So it is not statistical. How do we make it statistical? Well, we can have answers that vary if we ask more than one person. So, how often do students attend? It could be football practice. Let's just say sports practice. Each week. Because one kid might say, oh, I go to sports practice twice a week. Another might say 3 times a week, 5 times a week, 1 time a week. Whereas if I just say, how many times do you yourself go, it's an answer that would stay the same. So one way is to almost like broaden our audience or ask more than one person. Number 2, on average, how many hours of sleep do you get each night? Is that statistical or not? It sounds like it would be because I do have an answer. Sometimes I get 6 or 7 or 8, and I might say that, that averages to about 8 hours a night. So that must be statistical, but it is not. And it is not statistical for the same reason the first question wasn't, is that answer wouldn't vary. Now, I might have different amounts of sleep each night, but I do have just one average. So how do I make this statistical? You broaden the question out. How many hours of sleep do students get each week? And this is, again, this is on average. So that way, you'll have more people answering the question, so you'll have different answers, which means the data will be able to vary this time. Number 3, it says, what is the maximum number of free throws shots students on the basketball team can make in a row? Now, can you answer this with data? Yes, because it is about the maximum number of free throw shots people make. And also, will the answers vary? Yes, because you're asking multiple students. So this is statistical. All right, 4. Create both a statistical and non-statistical question of your own below. So how many hours, how about this? How many hours do students spend on screens each day? And this is on average, of course. So how do I make it non-statistical? I could say, how many hours do you spend on a screen on average each day? I could even make it even simple, is how was your day? That's not really a statistical question, but let's go ahead and keep it related. Let's say, how many hours do you spend on screens each day? And again, that would be an average. All right, so statistical versus non-statistical, you need to be able to answer it with data, and you need to have answers that vary. Cannot just be a single answer. So for example, another non-statistical question could be like, how old are 10-year-olds? Well, all 10-year-olds are 10 years old. So that's not a statistical question, even though the answers are numbers. It's that all 10-year-olds are 10, so it's not really statistical. Anyways, let's move on to task 3. It says, draw a line from each question to the best description of the question. Not all choices will be used. So my 3 choices are right here. Sorry, my 3 questions are right here. And I need to connect it to the sections below. So that's one. And I also have another one right here, and another one right there, and another one right here, and another one right there. So you need to connect it to the stuff below it. So let's start. So my 3 questions, my descriptions below, it could either be a numeric and statistical question. It could be categorical and statistical. It could be numeric and non-statistical, categorical and non-statistical, or it could be numeric and statistical. So I just realized it says numeric and statistical, and this also says numeric and statistical. So 2 of these are the same. Numeric and non-statistical versus categorical, and statistical and categorical and non-statistical. Anyways, let's read the questions. How much were monthly utilities for each house in a neighborhood? Okay, so how much? Well, that is numeric, because you measure that with money. And for each house in a neighborhood, well, that's statistical, because there could be multiple answers depending on the house. So I would say this is numeric and statistical. So I'd say that one goes there. I mean, technically, you can also have it go all the way over there if you want, but I'm going to keep it simple. All right, let's look at number 2. How many siblings do you have? How many siblings do you have? Well, that's numerical because it's the number of siblings, and it would not be statistical because I have 3 other siblings, and that's not a thing that can vary. So if you ask more than one person, how many siblings does each person have in a classroom in a 6th grade class? Yeah, that would be statistical, but this one is not. So this one goes straight down, numeric and not statistical. And finally, let's do the last one. This one right here, what is each student's favorite restaurant in class? Let's see, that's a category because some might say, oh, I really like Mexican or sushi or steak or, whatever. So, favorite restaurant, so that's categorical for sure. It's going to be one of these 2. And is it statistical? What is each student's? Yeah, you can have more than one answer because you're asking each student. So I would say that is statistical. That goes right there. So there it is. That's our lesson on statistical questions and data. So go ahead and try to answer some questions on your own. Good luck.